Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, a very warm welcome to our webinar, Green Transition, the Pathway to Zero Emissions at Net Zero Costs with Hauke Engel and me. So my name is Henrike Hahn. I'm a member of the European Parliament for the Greens since 2019. I'm in the ITRE Econ and Budget Committee and a speaker for industrial policy. So my passion is greening the industry as well as the social, ecological transformation of the economy. Because we have to meet at least the Paris climate goals and to do whatever it takes to fight against the climate change, to save our people and our planet. And I'm convinced the green economy is possible. And as we can see today, there are not only excellent arguments for that, but lots of other experts joining that perspective. So let me welcome Hauke Engel, partner at McKinsey, who was cited a lot in the press end of last year, claiming that it's possible to reach the target of net zero emissions of greenhouse gas at net zero cost. Means we can meet the Paris climate goals not for free, but in a way that really is cost neutral, means at net zero costs. And that's an outstanding argument, of course, contradicting a perspective of lots of people that we can't afford to fight against climate change. And it's not only a great pleasure for me as a Green parliamentarian, as I am to hear this argument in general, change is possible at net zero cost if we're smart enough, but also to hear it from a well-known consulting firm that is not necessarily known as supporting green ideas 100% all year long. So while using scientific arguments for that. And I also have to add that I was even more happy to read who was representing that study at McKinsey, that it's you, Hauke Engel, because I personally know you since quite a while. We used to go ice climbing and sport climbing together in Bavaria and in Austria. So one of my greatest passions in life. And we share not only nice memories in the nature itself we want to preserve, but as you can see in the following, we also share a focus of interest, like to realize a carbon-free EU at 2050, the latest. So Hauke is a partner in McKinsey's sustainability practice. McKinsey is an international management consulting firm that advises governments and businesses on strategic management. And Hauke supports organizations as they navigate and shape the transition to a zero carbon economy. And recently, Hauke and his team worked on a report that shows a promising way forward on how a decarbonization of Europe is possible until 2050 without raising the cost of living for middle and low income households. So these issues go directly in the middle of the work we do here in Brussels. I'm talking in Brussels at the moment on the Green Deal. During our legislative work in the European Parliament, so we Greens see a lot of resistance against the Green Deal, even it was claimed as core strategy of the work of the European Commission. One of the most important arguments is again and again in my legislative work when I talk to people and when we negotiate that I cite repeatedly in Hauke's reports picks up as well, the job potential of the Green Deal and the decarbonization process. So let me spell out that a little bit before Hauke presents his study. The transition to zero emissions in Europe can be reached at net zero costs and would yield a net gain of 5 million jobs, Hauke will explain. This is the case because reaching net zero emissions would create 11 million jobs and eliminate 6 million jobs through 2050. 11 minus 6 means therefore a net gain of 5 million jobs. And we know up to 18 million people could need training and transition support following the decarbonization path. And besides the job motor, there's a second advantage we can see here. Additionally, Europe would become basically energy independent in this process. And Europe currently pays a monthly bill of 27 billion euro for energy imports, mainly of oil and gas. And this is just going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, renewable energy technologies have become cheaper and cheaper in recent years than fossil fuels, being local means no imports as well. The cost of electricity production from solar photovoltaics, for instance, has declined by 80% over the last 10 years, and now solar can outcompete fossil fuel technologies. Renewable energies, the deployment of which must be massively upscaled to reach the EU 2050 climate neutrality target, don't only create savings in the EU energy bill, but they are also net job creators. And this is a proven fact. The EU Commission recent assessment of national energy and climate plans estimates that each €1 million shifted from brown to green energy creates a net increase of 5 jobs. We all know that renewable energies are more job intensive than fossil and nuclear energy, and planning, installation, and maintenance of wind and solar PV power plants create a high number of local green jobs. The solar photovoltaic sector is the most intensive job creator, with 12 jobs for each €1 million of investment. Another sector which will grow as a result of Europe's Green Deal is the energy efficiency one. The same report from the EU Commission states that while €1 million spending in fossil fuels would create 2.7 full-time equivalent jobs, the same spending would create 7.7 FTE jobs in energy efficiency. Additionally, respectable studies mentioned by the recently adopted EU Parliament report on the renovation wave indicate that increasing renovation rates to almost 3% can create up to 2 million jobs, particularly in SMEs, small and medium enterprises, which are the majority of the companies in the construction sector. So the building renovation rate in Germany must be increased dramatically, as the rate of medium and deep renovations is below 1%. So many aspects, of course, to take into consideration, but technologies which are complementary with renewable energies and energy efficiency, such as storage and hydrogen, are also poised to create many new jobs. So there are clear job opportunities as well in relation to the EU Circular Economy Plan and the Farm to Fork strategy. And the former can create new opportunities for SMEs in the repair market, for instance, as well. And the latter will create a push for local production and distribution chains, favoring EU SMEs as compared to international competitors. So these were only some introductory remarks, but having said all that on the job potential of the zero carbon economy, we have very important additional arguments. And I'm very delighted to have Mr. Hauke Engel, dear Hauke, with me today, who will present us his study in the following. We're looking forward to your thoughts, dear Hauke.
Super. Thank you for your intro, Heike. Great to be here, guys. So let me share my screen and give you a quick overview of the work, sharing a couple of slides here as well. So just to level set, right, we're talking about. So what we did here is we took the now adopted increased climate ambition that the EU has put forward, the minus 55% by 2030 relative to 1990, and the climate neutrality by 2050 goals across the entire EU. As you see mapped out here on this page, and asked ourselves, what is at the system level most cost optimal way to achieve this? So factoring in constraints such as resource availability, supply chain constraints, capacity constraints, etc., and of course using available and foreseeable technologies only. What is the mix of technologies? What are the changes by sector that achieves those goals, while minimizing total cost across regions and sectors? I think just to stay in the beginning, this is actually a pretty ambitious goal. As you see here in the black bubbles below the x-axis of the chart, the rate of decarbonization has been significant already in the past decades, but it would need to double, triple, almost quadruple in the coming years to achieve this goal. So there's a significant step up in the rate of decarbonization that we need to achieve. Now, what did we find? This is one way of looking at the solution space. This is the carbon abatement cost curve, where we see mapped all the different technologies that can be used across sectors to reduce emissions. Where we map on the x-axis, the extent of each block here is the carbon abatement potential, and so how many tons of CO2 can be removed by this technology. And the y-axis, the vertical extent, is the cost per ton of CO2. So what's below the axis is cost negative, so it actually saves money. What's above the x-axis is cost positive, so it increases, it adds the cost. Now, as you can see here, the picture is quite interesting. We see on the one hand, things particularly in transport and mobility actually save money. The shift to e-mobility, if you take a total cost of ownership perspective, actually saves us quite a bit of money. Whereas on the other hand, many things that we would need to do in industry, for example, to reduce emissions would structurally increase costs. What's also interesting is one of the headline findings that Henrike highlighted. If you compare the area below the curve and the area above the curve, these are actually pretty much identical. So the cost increases are netted out by the cost savings. So if we take the system perspective across all sectors over time, the net cost of achieving the climate goals would actually be roughly zero. Now, looking at this a bit more specifically, so this is the emission glide path that we come up with in this cost optimal scenario. And it's very much a scenario. It's definitely not a forecast. So we did not factor in kind of the policy goals as they're being discussed right now. This is purely taken where we are today and looking at the available technologies and laying out a plausible, internally consistent scenario for achieving this. And kind of let me quickly step through each sector to describe what we see happening there. So if you look at power, that in a way is one of the most advanced sectors already. Now the renewable technologies are already mature and can be deployed at scale, and they need to be deployed at scale because we need actually a lot more power to help electrify other industrial sectors. So we see there a rapid scale up of build out rates and also a doubling of power demand. In transport, the mobility sector, the picture is a little bit different. Here we spend basically the next decade or so to really build up the electric vehicle supply chains, the battery production capacity, et cetera, and then from 2030 onwards, roughly start turning over the car park to replace the internal combustion cars, the diesel engines, et cetera, with electric vehicles. And in a bit later, towards the 2040s, we also start building out the zero carbon aviation and shipping technologies. In buildings, the story is very different. Here we basically rely on already existing technologies. We're basically looking at deep insulation, as Henrike said, and we also need to replace gas boilers and fossil heating technologies with heat pumps. So this is really a technology we have today. The challenge is really that we basically have to work our way through the building stock, and we need to significantly increase the renovation rate, the retrofit rates, and this takes work and skilled labor capacity that we need to provide for this. Then we have industry, which again is structurally very different. Industry is actually quite a heterogeneous bunch of things. We're basically talking about the basic materials industry here. So this is steel, glass, chemicals, cement, where most of the emissions happen, which is relatively more challenging. So here we need new technologies like carbon capture and storage, new feedstocks like hydrogen, and it's also challenging because the economics are sometimes not easy. Because we often have to add a structural cost layer, for example, when we install a CCS unit on an already existing plant. And finally, we have agriculture, which again is a very different picture, which kind of is a two-sided coin. On the one hand, in agriculture, there are low-hanging fruit. There's some things we can do with existing technology that also saves money. For example, using electric tractors instead of diesel tractors. On the other hand, some emissions aren't easy to remove without dietary shifts. So without eating less lamb and beef in particular, it's going to be quite tricky to really address the agricultural challenges. And so we also need some negative emissions in the end to offset residual emissions in these other sectors. So we also need to look at scaling up natural carbon sinks from forests and our fields, and potentially also some degree of artificial carbon absorption technologies. So just to give you a high-level sense of what needs to happen sector by sector, what the overall glide path towards the 2030 and 2050 goal would look like. Now, zooming out a bit and just to illustrate a little bit what kind of the system level changes look like here. So what I've mapped out here is the energy flows that we see. And this is the current picture, rather 2017, which is the latest year where we have reliable data available. On the left-hand side are the supply side, different energy carrier sources, the fossils on the top, the renewables, nuclear, hydrogen, etc. On the right-hand side, we have the demand sectors. So where do the energy vectors get used in the end? As you can see right now, we have a fairly fossil fuel dominated system here. Now, if we zoom forward towards 2030 in our scenario, this is what this picture changes to. As you can see, and let me go back again. This is today. This is 2030. We already see a significant reduction in fossil fuel use, particularly coal reduces. We see more renewables happening. We see a little bit of hydrogen already making an appearance. And if we zoom further forward to 2050, this is the picture that we see. Almost completely eliminated fossil fuel use, a really large share of renewables, and hydrogen also being an important energy carrier alongside bioenergy and some others. So we're really talking about a fundamental reconfiguration of the EU energy system here. But it doesn't stop there. So this is the energy system. Another system that is often overlooked in the debate is the land use system. So this is the land use on the left-hand side here as it's today in the EU. And of course, land use has many objectives. There's food production, there's socio-cultural heritage, there's biodiversity. We also will need to achieve the climate goals in this scenario 2 additional functions for that land in the EU needs to provide. On the one hand, there's reforestation to increase the carbon absorption, to increase the natural carbon sinks. And there's also bioenergy, using what's called marginal lands would use biomass to convert into bioenergy and biofuels. So we also need not only to reconfigure our energy system, we also need to take an expanded lens on land use and use land for more things than we do it today. Employment, Henrike also touched on already. So we see quite a bit of employment shifts. You see at the bottom here that the changes by sector, 2030 and 2050. As you can see, power sees a significant add in jobs. This is primarily driven by the renewables build out. We see some losses in transportation simply because electric vehicles are somewhat easier to assemble than internal combustion engine vehicles. Industry, the losses there, particularly from oil and gas. Buildings, we see an increase again due to the need for more retrofit and insulation works that again need a lot of manual labor. And overall, if we look across all these sectors, all these shifts, we see a net increase in jobs of around 2 million by 2030 and around 5 million by 2050. But of course, it's also important to bear in mind that there's dislocations beyond those headline figures. So of course, reskilling and support for employment transitions will be a very important part of the transition plans here. And then we can also look at household spending, household costs. So what we did here is we basically took a typical EU household and looked at what they spend money on these days. And then we looked at how those cost factors would change, assuming that all the cost savings and cost increases would be passed through all the way to the end consumer, which is of course an important assumption, since often there's taxation or other things that distort these things on the way. But if we assume this complete pass through to the end consumer, we see that net, again, on the household level, there's basically no significant change. If anything, there might be a small decrease, but it's almost within the uncertainty here. And we see this is made up by housing often being a little bit less expensive because we save money on our heating bills from better insulation. Transport actually gets significantly cheaper because electric cars are cheaper to buy and maintain very soon. They're already cheaper to operate. They will soon also be cheaper to buy. And then going on vacation flights might be a bit more expensive, as we see some increase in recreation here as well. But net household costs would actually stay roughly neutral in this picture. So this is kind of the high level view across what will need to happen. What are the socioeconomic impacts? I think the summary message really is, it is absolutely achievable. It is achievable at net zero costs, but there's also some challenges, but also opportunities that are created. So let me maybe quickly check on the challenges that I would highlight. So first off, of course, this is not trivial to achieve. This is a substantial departure from the current trajectory. So we're definitely not on track right now to achieve these goals. So a big lift, a big intervention is required to put us on the course to achieve those climate goals. The reskilling challenge is also significant. Up to 18-20 million people would need to get support to transition into new jobs. On the trade side, again, given that we fundamentally change how we do some of our industrial activities, there is a risk that we create new import dependencies. For example, right now, solar panels that we install in the EU are mostly produced outside the EU. We might see dependency on iridium, for example, a raw material that's necessary for electrolyzers to produce green hydrogen. And there may also be impacts on competitiveness of EU firms, given that EU firms are often today leading in many industries, but given that then there's disruptions in those industries, the care needs to be paid that those industries don't fall behind and maintain their global leadership position. At the same time, there are also opportunities. The net zero cost already mentioned, this is eminently achievable from a societal perspective, from a macroeconomic perspective. There is a net gain in jobs. So we see an increase in employment. There's also an increase in energy security, as Henrike already highlighted in the introductory words. Right now, we import a lot of fuels. We would not need to import much fossil fuels at all in this scenario. And of course, there's also an opportunity for European companies to become innovation leaders and create new export segments in zero carbon technologies into the rest of the world. And there's many other factors. But I think just to give a bit of a flavor, what kind of challenges and opportunities we would be looking at in this scenario. So just to conclude this rapid fire tour through this work, I just want to highlight kind of 4 important action areas to actually now make this happen. And the first one is innovation. So clearly this hinges on new technologies. And although we do have line of sight on many of the required technologies already, so this is definitely not depending on some sort of unproven lab stage technology. Many of the technologies that we need in this scenario are already proven, are already out in the field. At the same time, we do need to continue to innovate, to invest in R&D more than we're doing right now. Secondly, there's what I call industrialization. We not only need the technologies, we also need to be able to deploy them at scale and at low cost. So we need to ensure that we can build the solar panels, the wind turbines, the CCS. We need to have the battery manufacturing capacity to actually really ramp up the deployment of these technologies. And then we need the infrastructure to be able to use these technologies. So we basically need to rebuild and upgrade the infrastructure backbone of the European Union, so that we're able to use the electric vehicles, that we're able to ferry the renewable power across the continent, et cetera, et cetera. So really an infrastructure investment program is needed too. And finally, there's the investment. So of course, this needs investment. We need to reallocate a lot of money over the next 30 years. The capital that would otherwise be spent, for example, on diesel tractors, on coal power plants, that needs to be redirected towards zero carbon technologies. And there's also a net increase in capital outlay that needs to happen, which is then recouped later through savings in operating costs. So just kind of a few headlines, a few themes to pick out from this work. Let me open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Hauke. I hope you can see me because my video is not on. Just a second. Yep, here we go. Thank you very much, dear Hauke, for your wonderful, interesting explanations. And there were so many details in it that I should mention again that this webinar will be recorded and can be seen on YouTube afterwards if you missed one of those explanations. And let me just invite you again, in your offices or at home when you're listening to our webinar today, that you can participate actively as well in a way that you can send us your questions and we will answer them. So the webinar, as you have seen, is in English, but we have a German audio translation which you can turn on if you click on the globe icon on the menu bar at the bottom, as well as the possibility to blend in German subtitles, which you can turn on if you click on the CC icon, and you can also adjust the size of the subtitles. I didn't mention that before, but it might be helped you now in the meantime. Und für alle deutschsprachigen Zuschauerinnen und Zuschauer, das Webinar ist ja auf Englisch und wird auf live, aber auch auf Deutsch gedolmetscht. Und wenn Sie das deutsche Audio einstellen möchten, dann müssen Sie dazu bitte auf das Globus-Symbol in der Menüleiste klicken. Es gibt außerdem die Option für deutsche Untertitel, die Sie einstellen können, indem Sie auf das CC-Icon klicken, und dort können Sie auch die Größe der Untertitel einstellen. So of course, we are happy to answer the questions you have now after Hauke's fine presentation. For those, please use the Q&A section. In German Zoom versions, it's called F&A section, F&A section. And of course, you can ask questions both in English and in German. If you have any technical problems or questions, please use the chat function and we will try to help you, of course. And at this point, I want to point out that we're recording this webinar again, just that you don't forget it. Thank you very much. So, dear Hauke, thank you very, very much for your explanations and your very interesting details. And of course, as a Green, the first thing I realize, of course, when I see your report, the natural gas as rich technology and the nuclear energy aspect, of course, that is very important. And of course, as a Green, I have to contradict there, of course, that's a natural thing. First of all, to begin with, natural gas as bridge technology. So in your study, you advocate for natural gas as a bridge technology, and I quote from the report, quote, in the short term, natural gas usage would rise to cover the gap from coal retirements that can't yet be supplied by renewable power. So of course, from the green perspective, natural gas produces a lot of emission and is dangerous for the climate. So could you envision a scenario that achieves the climate targets without relying on natural gas that extensively? And just to repeat the arguments we have in mind here, of course, investments in gas are not investments in the green transition. This is something we discuss all the time in the European Parliament, right? Because we have different perspectives here. And for us, investments in gas locks us into fossil fuels for quite a while. And natural gas looks attractive because it emits less CO2 than coal and oil. However, while CO2 is one of the main greenhouse gases responsible for global warming, other GHG have a very harmful environmental impact too. For instance, like coal and oil, the production and transport of natural gas emits large quantities of methane, which is as much more potent GHG than CO2, and coal to gas switching reduces GHG emissions only by half at best, as the International Energy Agency says. So considering that the average life cycle of a gas pipeline is 50 years, gas infrastructure built today will be a stranded asset. It's just a stranded asset for us from the green perspective, as it will have to be dismantled in less than 30 years to allow us to reach climate neutrality in Europe by 2050. And as highlighted in the communication on the recovery plan last summer, public investments in the recovery should respect the green oath to do no harm, and investments in gas are against this oath. So these are quite our arguments. I think you know them already, you're nodding, so I'm very interested in your thoughts here as well. Thank you.
Yeah, no, look, and it's a tricky question, right? And the challenge is, the key question here is how quickly do we think we can ramp up renewables, right? When we think about gas in the power sector, of course, there's gas use in other sectors, and for gas boilers in buildings, to produce blue hydrogen, et cetera, where we can probably get around gas more easily. When we look at power, I think the challenge really is how quickly can we ramp up renewables? And I think we already assumed in our scenario pretty aggressive renewables build out ramp up. Which is, again, not the current direction of travel. Now, when you look at the numbers, the build-out rates are stalling. When you talk to the developers on the ground, for example, in Germany, they're reporting that permitting takes ever longer. There's more and more resistance from on the ground, and you told more and more town halls. It's just, the direction is actually the other direction at the moment. That this is getting more difficult, not easier. So assuming that there's a limit to renewables build out, you're basically faced with two choices. So you can either bring in gas, or you can apply CCS to coal power plants. No, I think that is basically the two easy choices we have in the near term. And faced with that, gas is simply the lesser of two evils. I think that's one important consideration. So if we manage to really put a big push on renewables, we can get away with less gas. In the absence of that, there's just not many choices we have. I think the other important point to consider when it comes to stranded assets and infrastructure is that pipelines can be repurposed. So we need more CCS pipelines, for example, to decarbonize our industrial clusters. And we also need hydrogen transport pipelines. So not all gas pipelines, but many gas pipelines could actually probably be repurposed, reused, and they might not necessarily be stranded. And likewise, the CCGTs, the gas power plants, they probably would be used less, but they could still be used as peaking capacity to provide backup capacity. So it's what I hear you. Now, I think that the challenge is indeed what is a viable alternative if we don't manage to radically increase renewables build out.
Thank you very much, dear Hauke, and I certainly agree with you on the argument that gas infrastructure can be repurposed for hydrogen. So it also definitely means, in a consequence for our parliamentary work, that no new gas infrastructure needs to be built. Of course, that we don't have to finance that with tax money here in the European Union. So hydrogen can at best use some of the existing gas infrastructure with some upgrades. However, probably there's a need for new dedicated hydrogen infrastructure linked to the points where renewable energy-based hydrogen is produced and to points where it is consumed, for example, locations where hard to abate industries are located. So we have to be honest at that, right, to spell that out as well, but there are alternatives. And once again, I encourage you, dear participants, to send us your questions, because I'm happy to send them or to tell them to Hauke. For example, we had a question from Nils Zimmermann to Hauke. Why use any land for biofuels? It's 2 times or 30 times more efficient to use land for PV fields and then use the PV generated power to make power to X. We have a second question. I will just bundle some of them a little bit from Ralf Hunger. Could you elaborate on the net cost a little bit and what it means? I can certainly understand that question because it's a very technical term, right? And what does it mean in real life? And then we have an additional question. I don't really understand, but I will send it to you as well, from Manuela Troschke. Could you please elaborate a bit on the constraints you mentioned? So because you were talking about a lot of constraints, but maybe you know better what is meant here. Thank you.
Yeah, super. So Niels, I think you're saying that it's more efficient to use solar power than create power to X. Let's take this offline, because my understanding is actually that biofuels are a lot more cost efficient and overall systemically efficient than power to X, if you have the land and the biomass for it. And so what we assume is that you use the biomass for bioenergy and biofuels. This is actually more efficient than more renewables, particularly when you already renewables build out constraint, given that this biomass could be produced in rural regions that are structurally disadvantaged and where there's low value land that could be repurposed for this. But there's probably going to be a quite technical discussion on the how do you define efficiency and what lens do you take here. But happy to take this on a one-on-one conversation, Niels. Net zero at net zero cost. I think that there's 2 important concepts to internalize here. So one is the kind of the total lifetime cost or total cost of ownership. And what we find is that when you switch from a current technology to zero carbon technology, in many cases, you spend more money up front. So the capital expenditure is higher. As right now, an electric vehicle, for example, costs more money to buy, but then it's cheaper to operate. So if you stick with the electric vehicle example, you spend less money on charging an electric vehicle than you would spend on a diesel car fueling at the petrol station. So if you take a total cost of ownership perspective, your cost of mobility per kilometer traveled for your car is lower when you switch to an electric car than if you buy a new diesel car. So I think that's one important point. And this is about the total cost across the full lifetime of the asset, so to say. And then the net also refers to that we aggregate across everything. So in some instances, we actually have an increase in costs. For example, in steel making, when we shift to hydrogen-based steel making or CCS. But that is balanced by the other sectors like mobility, where we have net savings. So the net refers both to the aggregate over time and the total duration of the asset use, and also that it's averaged across all sectors. Then we had a question on the constraints. So but what we try to do basically is to stay within the realm of the feasible. As we said, I think that there is just a certain limit, a realistic limit to renewables build out. I don't know what it is exactly, but we try to put a kind of a peg down and say roughly this is probably achievable. And beyond that, it's just pushing the envelope too much. And likewise, when it comes to electric vehicle penetration rates, the industry needs some time now for the model development, to scale up battery production, to make the necessary innovations in battery technology. So there's a certain lead time that we need until we can really ramp up the uptake of some of these technologies. Some of these technologies even need more innovation yet, to get out of the lab and into the field. So it's these kinds of constraints that we try to factor in to stay within the technically feasible, and within that then optimize for costs.
Thank you very much, dear Hauke. And we have an additional question of Silke Brehm. Her question concerns the so-called unused land or wasted land mentioned for energy production. And Silke Brehm, she mentions that there's a need to extend the protected areas for natural habitats according to the biodiversity strategy and the catastrophic loss of biodiversity. So her question is, can we still promote this kind of land use for energy?
Yeah, so what we assumed here is, and this is based on the EU classification for lands, that there's a type of land that is neither valuable for agricultural use because the productivity is too low, and it's also not rich in biodiversity. And those are the lands that are currently what are called marginal lands, that are just not very useful for anyone at the moment, to be blunt. And it's those lands where you can still grow some of the plants like scrubs, miscanthus, that you can then harvest for biomass that can be used for biofuels. Yeah, we're neither talking about diverting productive agricultural land for bioenergy production, as has happened in the past, nor would this entail cutting down biodiversity-rich forests for biomass production. It's really using what the EU classifies as marginal lands for biomass production. So neither the biodiversity objectives nor the agricultural production objectives should be jeopardized by this.
Thank you very much, dear Hauke. And now, after these questions from the participants, let me add a question as well on the nuclear energy I mentioned before, because that's something, of course, that goes right into the core of what we fight against, the Greens, right? Or we don't see an alternative for. So for the start, we agree, of course, definitely with lots of findings in your propositions you have in that study. But where we disagree is the use of nuclear energy. And in the report, you assume that both the share and the absolute amount of nuclear energy generation decreases until 2050. And it still makes up a significant share of the energy mix proposed by your report. So have you also analyzed a pathway where nuclear energy is banned much earlier? And could you maybe outline the implications that an early ban of nuclear energy would have?
Yeah, so look, what we did here is we basically only optimized for costs and CO2 emissions, right? So we said, how can we, within the existing constraints, achieve the climate goals? So the additional considerations like a nuclear phase out were not part of the considerations. And we also, when we looked at developed technologies, we used kind of real life costs, and that's what we don't see a build out of nuclear, because in many cases in real life there's significant cost overruns. So nuclear is actually not, at least not new builds, a competitive technology in this scenario. At the same time, we do continue running the existing nuclear because we have it already and it provides a stable base load that is CO2 free. If you wanted to take that out, we basically go back to the challenge when we discussed gas, right? Because you're basically taking out a stable baseload supply that you need to then replace, either through more gas, more coal, or renewables with balancing. And given that we already have the renewables build out challenge, the question is indeed then, what happens? And we might default then to coal plus CCS again, or more gas, or we just don't achieve the climate goals. It's a tricky conundrum that is not easy to resolve. But you basically, and if you look at what happened in Germany, you could say, when we look at the renewables built out in Germany over the last couple of years, we've basically only managed to replace the nuclear that we phased out. If we'd maintained the nuclear, we would have replaced more coal already. Now I don't want to say what is better, but just to say, look, we actually had to kind of, the nuclear phase out put us back in terms of the decarbonization of the grid. So I think it's not tricky. I mean, you go back to the renewables build out question.
It's a tricky question. That's right. But of course, there are solutions for that, for alternatives and different scenarios. And I can only tell you from my legislative work, when we were confronted, of course, when we talked about the amendments, for example, on the Just Transition Fund and other files, that we don't agree to nuclear support with the EU instruments, that we use the kind of arguments that legally the decommissioning and other investments in nuclear fall under the Euratom Treaty and therefore can't be included in legislation, the basis of which is the TFEU. And I don't know if you were following the discussion on the recovery plan in summer last year, but as highlighted there, public investments in the recovery should respect the Green Oath to do no harm, and investments in nuclear are against this oath. This is just one of many arguments we have against nuclear energy, and we still have to follow that discussion, of course. And let me pick up the next question. Thank you very much. We really received lots of wonderful questions here, and I only have to pick one, which is not easy to do. But this one I really love as well, from Alfred Zinke. How do you see the problem of availability of raw materials like rare earths, etc., for massive buildup of electric power? And I think that's a very interesting question as well. I will going to work on raw materials on the INI report in the industry committee in the following months. So raw materials is very basic for a green industry policy as well. And maybe you have some thoughts in here as an answer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and there's multiple dimensions to this, right? There's the import dependency, the critical supply chains perspective, which the EU is, of course, actively working on. And then there's the fundamental supply, in the sense of, is there enough accessible reserves of these resources? And then there's the short-term availability challenges, right? Can we ramp up production quickly enough? And so far, across most of these raw materials, the experience has been that we don't have a fundamental supply problem, but we sometimes do have a short-term production capacity problem. That we, particularly for some things that need several years lead time to bring new mines online, we can have price flare-ups if there's short-term bottlenecks in supply. So this can be an issue, and the industry is starting to actively manage that, the vertical integration, the value chain, and other things. But I think there is seldom a fundamental supply problem. It's really about the shorter term availability. And then often also the engineers manage to react to any constraints by engineering out the use of critical supplies.
Thank you very much for your patience with these wide and wild questions, but your study was full of interesting details. So of course, it's very exciting to hear your opinion here. And I wondered, let me broaden our scope here now a little. We talked about European transition. Let's focus on the global scale. Of course, we had elections in the United States. We have President Joe Biden, who returned to the Paris Agreement. We are very glad about that. Of course, in Europe. And he has campaigned on a much bolder approach against climate change. And the pathway you outlined in the study is EU specific. So do you think it would also work in other regions in this world? Because the news we received recently from the States, I certainly think that they really need a just transition plan like we have here in Europe, and that we should really come together and discuss that and learn from each other, right? To have that, because it is not as easy as it seems to be really to communicate that there's a real chance here, like the job potential we just mentioned, but that it's not only something that is a loss and scary or something, but really to underline all the perspective and things we can do in that regard. So I'm interested in your opinion here. Thanks.
Yeah, look, I think fundamentally the pathway would probably look quite similar, because the fundamental levers and technologies would be the same. Of course, there's some regional idiosyncrasies, local characteristics. For example, we might see, given that the US has, at least right now, lower natural gas prices, we might see more blue rather than green hydrogen. So hydrogen produced through steam methane reforming with carbon capture and storage, instead of with renewable energy and electrolysis. We might see more CCS. But this would be kind of second order nuances rather than fundamental differences, I would say. Right? So I think the big picture would probably look quite similar, given that the underlying industry emissions that need to be attacked and developed technologies are basically the same. And then if you then superimpose the fact that we now have multiple regions on the globe being ambitious on the climate agenda, that of course also creates a self-reinforcing effect, right? For example, if we standardize product norms on these new zero carbon technologies, for example, on electrolyzers, batteries, et cetera, then we can capture economies of scale, diffuse innovation much more effectively using a much larger underlying volume, and hence it becomes cheaper for everyone involved. And also when everyone's committed to this, then solving the trade implications and the carbon border adjustment mechanism, et cetera, should become easier. So fundamentally, I think this is, of course, very good news. And the pathway would probably look quite similar.
That would be wonderful if it would be like that. And even if when we all have to hurry up a little, right? We don't have time, I think, to reconsider everything, but just to go forwards and to be courageous, right? To see the real potential we have in here. And you were just mentioning the industry. Let me pick that up because we have a question from Sabine Stadl-Strauch. I think it's very interesting. So in your experience, dear Hauke, how is the industry reacting on all these changes ahead of us? And of course, we do know that there are lots of industry experts are very interested in scoping all this transition and to invest in the future in a way that they are competitive and resilient, of course, and sustainable as well. And this is something we really have to focus on in the following years. The industry has to invest a lot in the following years, and that will have consequences for decades now, what kind of decisions are taken now. And we are in dialogue. Politics and industrial leaders have to be much more in dialogue than ever before, right? And we also have to adapt as politicians to the rapidity of the market, right? And everything, and that we really, that we not only discuss, that really something is done in a way that we can follow the path of transition. And as a reminder, we had last year in the European Union, the industry strategy announced by Thierry Breton, and we expect an update this summer maybe, or this year at least. And what we definitely missed last time was a new chapter on renewable energy, for example. I talked to Thierry Breton, and this is was something that I recommended, but it might be the case. Hopefully that it is more spelled out in the update of the industry strategy. So once again, your thoughts would be very precious, how the industry reacts on all these thoughts you have.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, Henrike, right? I think we will see much more dialogue and engagement between politics and industry in the coming years, right? Because in the end, this is almost a guided industrial transition that we now that we will see in the next decades. Yeah? So this is ultimately, it starts with policy intervention, but then of course we do need the business, the private sector as the engine of innovation and delivery, right? So I think that these dialogues are super important. And both ways, right? That policymakers understand the constraints and the chances that business have, and that business can help constructively engage in the policy debate. Now, when you ask how are industry leaders reacting to this, right? I think what we've seen in the last 12, 18, 24 months is really a significant mindset shift across many regions and sectors, that people get it and they want to help, they want to engage, they want to do this. And it's really now all about how do we do this? Because of course, as you said yourself, it's not easy for many industry leaders because of these CEOs, these executives, they have obligations to their communities, to their stakeholders, to their employees. And this is not tricky to navigate when you're an incumbent. So it's really about the key question is how do we get it done? And what do we bring, but also what do we need help from the policymakers to shape this in a way that it's feasible for us to strive and to help deliver this transition.
Thank you very much for your thoughts here as well. And I think let's pick in this round a last question we have from Manuela Troschke. Are economic incentives big enough to stimulate investment in R&D, or do you include governmental intervention to get things done? This could be a question as well to the parliamentarians, I guess.
I was about to say, I think that is to you, Henrike. Yeah, but from my limited experience, right? Economic signals are necessary, but often not sufficient. Because often markets are imperfect, despite everything we would like to believe. So sometimes other forms of intervention are also required. And maybe that's one reason why we see increased debate or indeed decisions in other geographies about phase outs for certain technologies like internal combustion engines or gas boilers, which is a different kind of signal. It's not an economic signal. So I think the economic signal is important, but oftentimes it's one out of many possible options to help shape these changes.
Thank you. Yes, I think actually, when you have a look at the huge companies, they often invest a lot in research and development, right? It's not the big, huge companies who need support necessarily, but on universities, startups, everything, they have so much potential we have to encourage. And when you look last summer, when we had the discussion on the MFF, right? There was a real agreement in all groups in the European Parliament that we didn't agree on a shortage on the EU budget for Horizon Europe, for example, right? And if you go to all these things we discussed today, I think as a real priority we have also in the coming budget 2022, for example, I'm going to work on in the budget committee, we need research and development as a focus, right? Because this goes directly to the core of green industry policy. And when we want to have change, of course, we have existing technology that is employable, that is usable already. But on the other hand, we have to develop something, and then we can't make a cut on Horizon Europe, for example, right? And there was, we were heard in the European Parliament. It was afterwards, the last proposal was getting a little better than that. But this is a core issue, I think, the research and development, of course. So thank you very much, dear Hauke, for the first round of questions. There were from every point, somehow, from every angle. So let me tell you a little bit about my work in the European Parliament, going to these issues as well. And then we can have a second discussion round again. So as you know, we Greens have long advocated for an ambitious path to fight for climate protection on multiple levels, the European, national, local one. And first of all, on European level, the Green Deal is, of course, a massive plan to make the economy sustainable and more resource efficient. And the Green Deal is the heart and the core of our post-COVID-19 recovery policies and a crucial enabler of a just and fair transition of our economies. And last year, we have in the EU agreed on the long-term EU budget, the multi-annual financial framework, or MFF, that 30% of its climate-related spending. We Greens, we wanted 50%, but now it is 30%, which is also a great progress somehow if you compare it with before. And this will ensure that money of the EU is used in projects protecting biodiversity and our environment. And we are also able to include a do no harm principle in the EU budget, which ensures the EU budget will not fund any projects that are harmful to the climate. And what does it mean in practical terms for our work of the European Parliament? So in my personal business, I had the chance to work firsthand on the Just Transition Mechanism file. So the Just Transition Mechanism is a key element of the Green Deal. It's a tool to ensure that the transition towards a climate neutral economy happens in a fair way, leaving no one behind. So this is a sentence that is often cited by the Commission as well, right? We don't have to leave anyone behind, but you have to spell it out in a practical way, of course. And the Just Transition Mechanism addresses the social and economic effects of the transition, focusing on the regions, industries, and workers who will face the greatest challenges, and mobilizing at least 150 billion euro. Means the Just Transition Fund endowed with 17.5 billion euros, where I contributed firsthand as a rapporteur in the Economic Committee. And the fund will support regions affected by the transition to climate neutrality and prevent social disruption. So one of my main goals during the negotiations was to keep any funding of gas projects out of the scope of the fund. So we Greens, we don't think that gas is a bridge technology, as I mentioned before and discussed with Hauke as well. We did not want that a single euro is spent for that in the Just Transition Fund. And we Greens took a firm stand and achieved that no money from the GTF will be used for any projects related to gas. And that was for me not only a personal strong success, I was very happy about, but this is also a necessity to reach our climate goals. And we know that the production and transport of natural gas emits large quantities of methane, which is much more potent, as I mentioned before. And the second file I currently work on in the framework of the Just Transition mechanism is the public sector loan facility. So in German, it's called Darlehensfazilität, which sounds complicated, but actually it's not, it's only the term. It's a file I'm currently negotiating with the Council and the Commission that will enable the European Investment Bank to lend 10 billion euro with a contribution from the EU budget of 1.5 billion euro, which is in turn expected to mobilize between 25 and 30 billion of public investments supporting just transition over the period of 2021 and 2027. So that's really a lot of money overall, and it's really worth to discuss what we want to do with that as EU taxpayers, right? And the purpose of this facility is to provide public sector entities with resources to implement measures to facilitate the transition to climate neutrality. And the investments will range from energy and transport infrastructure, district heating networks, energy efficiency measures, including renovation of buildings, as well as social infrastructure. So all the aspects we also mentioned before, and you mentioned in your report already as well, dear Hauke. So apart from that, as an additional factor, we didn't talk about SMEs yet somehow, you know, what they can contribute to that transformation purpose. And I focus as well on enabling the green transition for small and medium-sized enterprises. So in the industry committee, I was shaping the report on a new strategy for European SMEs with other shadow rapporteurs. And here I was calling for the removal of all barriers preventing SMEs from adopting green business models. And after intense discussions, I've managed to introduce in the Parliament's report clear demands to also support the ecological transition of SMEs. As SMEs represent more than 90% of all companies in Europe, SMEs are at the core of the transition to a clean, climate-neutral economy. And some small entrepreneurs have great ideas for sustainable processes, products, and services, but have no market for them. And many other small entrepreneurs are not aware of environmental legislation or of what they could do to improve their environmental performance. And importantly, they're unaware of the benefits sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it's the case in terms of cost savings, for instance, that sustainable business practices can yield to them. And policymakers, like people like I am, right, as a deputy, we should adopt measures to support both types of entrepreneurs, the sustainability pioneers and the laggards as well. And as a consequence as well, we need to create markets for sustainable products. We need to allow consumers to make informed choices about the products they buy. We need to make sure sustainable solutions become competitive compared with more polluting ones, of course. And as an additional idea, public authorities must lead by example. So if green public procurement rules were applied in the food supply chain, for instance, our small biological agri-food companies would gain greater market shares and would be able to drive their costs down. And what we also have to do is to strengthen local initiatives building on already existing structures, which provide information, advice, peer-to-peer exchanges to SMEs on sustainable business models and practices. And from the storekeeper to the maintenance person or the small factory owner, every small business can profit from the green transition while contributing to making our economy sustainable and resilient. So this is spelled out a little, you know, one of the million possibilities we can do in the future, right, to get a green transition. And I think if you many European rules have short-term costs, but medium, long-term benefits and are drivers for innovation and sustainability. So we also have to think about energy efficiency measures for buildings, waste treatment obligations. They generate duties for citizens and companies, but yield environmental health and competitiveness benefits in the medium term. And what Europe needs is not necessarily less regulation, but a better regulation, because we always discuss, right, administrative burdens, and there are too many regulation, but it's not the quantity that counts, is rather the quality. And we see as in the parliament that it has already been acknowledged by the EU Commission that this is the case. So this is a European level, but I come from Bavaria. The Bavarian Greens are my home somehow, of course, and they made a wonderful suggestion as well. They made a plan how to contribute to the climate protection plans with the help of the Bavarian Green Deal. And in this plan, it is outlined how we can make the energy transition a success while creating jobs and value add in the region, which is important as well, right? It's not only the macro level, it's also the micro level where we have to push the change. And for the energy transition, the Bavarian Greens want more renewable energy funding, better electric car infrastructure, a CO2 price on national level, more public transfer, and a more resource and energy efficient building sector. So this Bavarian Green Deal also shows the way on how we can further upskill our workforce by more targeted education and training on the job. And for the machine engineering and automotive industry, we have that, of course, in North Rhine-Westphalia, right, in Baden-Württemberg, but also in Bavaria. We had last week, a webinar on the automotive industry that's really it's ready for transition. It's already in a transition process. We want an ecological transition and strengthen regional research and industry networks, of course. And then the Mittelstand, right, the small and medium-sized enterprises are the backbone of the Bavarian economy as well, but also in Europe, of course. Provides a lot of jobs, and of course we have to take into that account as well. So once again, that was a little more concrete, you know, how to bundle all these aspects together, that we not only talk about strategy in theory, but also how it is implemented in the parliament. I will just open up the second question round, and let me check if we have additional questions here. Just let me check. So many companies where, yeah, I just open a question to both of us, dear Hauke. Climate crisis is one issue, but what about biodiversity crisis? Both crises needs simultaneous tackling. Is that implemented in your report as well? That was a question.
So we do, of course, factor in the biodiversity targets when it comes to land use, the 30% by 2030 that the EU is committed to. Beyond that, it is not an explicit target optimization, so to say. Yeah, but of course, there are no negative impacts per se. Yeah, but if we overlay additional objectives, maybe the picture would be slightly different. Having said that, I think the key challenge, of course, biodiversity in Europe is pollution and habitat protection. So that should be very much in line with the changes that we see here. Henrike, what would you say?
Yeah, of course, it definitely goes together. It's a very good question. It's rather a remark, I think, and everything has to come together. And I think if you look at the European Commission's work and their strategies, they also think that together. But it has to be bundled in a way with a different focus, right? It's, of course, you know, my personal work is very important in the aspect that I think businesses has to become resilient, competitive, and sustainable. But on the other hand, we have various different necessities that are even more important. It is that biodiversity, is the protection of climate and the environment, and then we also have to rank the priorities in our work in a way, and which is spelled out in the legislative fails definitely, right? When we talk about what I was just telling, when we talk about how to invest in the future, how we really want to spend every euro, then this has to be implemented. And of course, we had with the EU budget a very recent discussion where we really have to take that into account. So we really have to. I think this is something you could do a different webinar on, right? So with a different angle, and it would definitely be worthwhile doing it. And just again, a question to you, Hauke. On the cost of living for middle and low income, coming back to your study again. One remarkable finding for many of those who read the reports or were just listening to your lines when I was following the discussion around it as well, is the fact that you describe a pathway that envisions a slightly decreasing cost of living for middle and low income households. And this is very interesting, as many opponents of decisive action against climate change often cite a potential increase in costs for citizens, right? They say, well, it's just to change is too expensive to do it, right? To realize it. And this is something I'm often confronted on panels as well when I talk to business leaders, and not all of them, right? But but you always have to spell out, no, it's not only worthwhile in ecological terms, but also in economic terms. So could you maybe elaborate on that? And what would you change concretely in daily lives?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't know the studies that these people reference, so I can't respond to that specifically. But and maybe let's start with what would actually change in the daily lives. And maybe somewhat counterintuitively, I would say actually not that much would change from a kind of a private citizen perspective, because many of the changes that we need to make are almost hidden in the industrial operations. So I mean, what we would see is, we would live in better insulated houses. We'd use heat pumps instead of oil or gas boilers. We would drive an electric vehicle, which is better acceleration, by the way, and it's a lot of fun to drive. So, and a few other changes, but nothing would radically change. And I think what does change quite substantially are certain industrial manufacturing processes. So on the surface, unless of course you work in one of these areas that see changes, not much might actually change. From the cost perspective, as I explained earlier, if you assume the full pass-through of all the changes, which is a big assumption, of course, we would see a slight net decrease in living costs. We see basically in the savings in mobility and heating bills would outweigh the increases for, let's say, vacation flights and food cost increases, for example. But again, the devil is in the details, and the question is, of course, how are those changes achieved? And of course, if there's taxation changes on energy, for example, that can lead to a different picture. So I think it's the design of the policies on how to affect those changes that is critical here.
Thank you very much. I also received a question of Hannelore Putz-Geisler. She is asking if it becomes clear that behavioral changes, for example, in traffic, are definitely necessary. To what extent in the report have these been taken into account? And if so, what changes were taken as a basis for citizens? So of course, it would be interesting, when someone as well, that like you are working such a specialist on all these details, on these details of change. Is there something you also implemented in your personal life? Did you change something, your behavior or something? Because there's something like, right, we work on the great issues, but on the other hand, it affects our daily life, of course, as well. So did that report had any effect on your personal life as well? Did you have any conclusions for that as a second question?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. So on the first question, so we consciously chose not to force people to change, right? So we only work with technology levers. However, there are, of course, many behavioral changes that would also be helpful. And one of the most important ones would be diet shifts. If we eat less meat, particularly lamb and beef, that would reduce methane emissions. And methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas, so that would actually help a lot, particularly in the near term. There's also behavioral changes around, for example, heating, turning down the thermostat a degree or two, maybe wearing a jumper instead of a t-shirt at home would also help a lot. Travel patterns could help, new ways of urban mobility, more walking or biking instead of taking the bike, shift towards public transport, taking the car, shift towards public transport. So these things all help. And also kind of behavioral shifts in the broader sense, like new building materials are also helpful. And that also would lower the cost of the transition, because behavioral change usually is free and often saves money. So that is not factored in, but could be factored in, and then the picture would be more achievable and even lower cost. Regarding myself, so indeed, I've further changed my diet, almost completely vegetarian now. I've also cut down on long hot showers and heating a little bit. But in the end, I think honestly, we need systemic change here, right? I mean, yes, there are choices we can make as private citizens, as consumers, but particularly as citizens and voters to drive this change. But in the end, we need the system to change. And that really is the big lever to affect this transition.
Yeah, that's very interesting to hear. Thanks. Just as an additional question, because I can imagine, like when you were discussing with other business leaders as well, that you were confronted too with the argument again of energy security, because this is something, energy security, that is always mentioned as something that could stop somehow the change or transition or using renewable energies. So I would be interested in your arguments here, how you would contradict or how you would answer these kind of questions.
Yeah, so I'm not a deep energy system expert, right? But I've been working now in this broader field for over a decade, and all the time people have said, oh yeah, but we're now hitting the limit to renewables built out. It was 7% 10 years ago, then it was 15%, then it was 20%, and every time we blew through that limit and nothing changed. Yeah, but still people now say, oh, we'll have blackouts. Yeah, but it hasn't happened so far. Yeah? So I'm just by empirical evidence a little bit skeptical of those impending blackout doom and gloom forecasts. At the same time, of course, it does become more challenging as we have more renewables in the system. But so far we have managed to balance that and to ensure adequate power supply. And of course, you need to think energy supply more broadly, right? And when you talk to colleagues in Central European countries, of course, their independence from imports of fossil fuel is hugely important. So I think that's also an aspect here. And also when you think it more broadly in terms of price stability, oil prices fluctuate widely. If we replace oil and other fossil fuels with electric power produced from renewables in our own countries, of course, you have much more stable price environment as well, which would be helpful for companies and consumers. So I think there are legitimate concerns about the power system stability. So far, we've managed to solve them. So I'm optimistic that we continue solving them. And there's all sorts of upsides. And when you think about the broader energy rather than power system in terms of stability and security of supply.
Thanks for your thoughts on that. And I have to say, I'm really happy to see that we've received so many questions and remarks. And please, just in case we don't take into account your question or remark in here, don't hesitate to send it to me via email. I'm happy to answer to it, and everything will be considered. And yeah, because I see we have only 15 minutes left, right? And times goes by quickly, but I have an additional question by Ruth Steinacker. So she's asking you, in the transport sectors, it is just a matter of switching from previous fuels to renewable energies, or are there also considerations to change the transport sector in such a way that, for example, transports are saved?
Yeah, both is of course important. Yeah, so the primary mechanism here is indeed the changing the technology. Now, so switching from combustion engine to electric or fuel cell, battery electric or fuel cell electric. But of course, there is a lot of potential, particularly in urban mobility, both in how people travel around the city, but also how we transport goods around the city and the environment. So there are potentials to redesign and rethink transport systems. Absolutely. Yeah, but that is of course not non-trivial to implement either. Because you need to reshape a fairly complex and bottom-up governed system, which is possible but non-trivial.
Thank you very much. And Hauke, we were using lots of terms now, like this webinar explodes, right, from all the terms and all the thoughts we have when we think of a Green Deal and energy change and everything. And we didn't mention taxonomy yet, right? Taxonomy as a unique framework to guide public and private investments in the EU. And I think that was a real green success that we had that. And lots of people say that there's too much administrative burden on green players using that. Would you agree on that, or do you think that it's feasible also for business leaders, for companies to handle that?
Yeah, so I don't really have an inside-out view there. Yeah, but of course people say, look, the permitting could always be easier and faster. And when you look at renewables, I think that there's probably something to that argument. And maybe in other aspects as well. But I'm not being told by the people I speak to and the clients I work with that there's significant more paperwork for green stuff than for non-green stuff. So I don't think the evidence, at least as I see it, supports that view.
Okay, thank you. Once again, a question from Manuela Troschke. On the short run, consumers have to be costs and are affected, as studies by Deutsche Institut für Wirtschaftsforschung in Berlin show for CO2 pricing implemented now, causing disparities. On the long run, the net may be achieved, but how can we handle potential short-term cost increases? That's a question that I could also repeat again.
I don't know this study. Thanks for flagging that. Need to look at that. I presume this refers to the fact that when you have energy cost increases, those of course affect particularly lower income households disproportionately, given that they have a higher share of total spending on energy. But yeah, I would have to look at the study in detail. But indeed, of course, I think the managing of the disparities is one of the critical tasks that we now have. And Henrike, I'm sure you can speak to that, because that's of course a key policy making or objective. So I think the just transition, it needs to be just, of course, and the disparities need to be identified and managed, and this is not going to happen by itself. But ultimately, I think the system can be optimized for everyone. So, but Henrike, why don't you share your thoughts from your work?
Yeah, thank you very much. I wonder why we are talking somehow. That is something like, if you would meet up to have coffees, for example, I would immediately ask you, also in that context we talk about today, like when you are working for McKinsey, a company that is consulting, right? Like when you talk with other with clients, like with businesses or something. Do you think that we have a different atmosphere for change now if you compare it like 5 years ago? Is that, we had that Fridays for Future movement, of course, that is all in our heads. And there's a young generation warning that we really have to hurry up. And then there are politicians, for example, or scientists or something who provide the tools or instruments somehow, like your study as well, for example, to go along that path, that we change something, that we at least meet the Paris climate goals. And when you talk to business leaders, for example, do you also think that there's a change that they also take into account not only the arguments like climate protection, environmental, but also that it's really worthwhile to be competitive? Because when you look at the automotive sector, for example, right, you need a sustainable strategy also for the future, that your businesses remain competitive, because the Verbrennungsmotor, right, is something that is running out somehow, right? So they need business models that have to be updated, otherwise they won't exist anymore, maybe as companies in the coming years. So when you talk to business leaders, for example, is that something, the necessity of change, is that something that is implemented in their strategy on a pragmatic level increasingly, or is it still something that is rather a climate environment as a pressure from outside, as something that politicians love, but not necessarily the business leaders are responsible? So I'm very interested in your perspective here.
Yeah, it has changed quite a bit over the years, right? And I think that the changes, and you mentioned quite a few of the relevant factors, right? We have Fridays for Future and other youth movements that kind of shifted the societal debate. We have investors waking up to the risks and opportunities around climate change and pressuring their companies to understand this better. We have the regulatory, the political debate that has shifted. And last but not least, we've also seen the physical effects of climate change are now really being felt and how to ignore. So I think the debate has shifted. And of course, what's also helped is that many of these technologies are now actually matured. So making the change is now easier than it was 10 years ago, because it is more achievable, it is easier. And it is being translated into business strategies. But the picture then varies sector by sector, because for some automotive, I think there's now a clear consensus of what the technology of choice is. All the big OEMs are investing into the new world, are investing into e-mobility, into batteries, et cetera, et cetera. In others, there's still work to be done to figure out how to achieve this. When you look at shipping or aviation, I think the technology pathway is not as clear, or in steel, for example, where we see lots of pilots happening, research happening. So again, there's constructive engagement, but we are still figuring out what we think the best way forward is. And we see lots of experimentation, piloting, et cetera, et cetera. But fundamentally, yes, the debate has very much shifted. It is now almost universally across the board a constructive engagement and realization that this is the direction of travel, and it's really about figuring out how to navigate and shape the transition and how to thrive in it.
Thank you very much for your thoughts here. And of course, I didn't ask a question yet on hydrogen, I think. So I pick up one question of Martin Schachte. I think that's a very interesting one. So if you compare the production of hydrogen in Europe versus the import of hydrogen to Europe, do you think that there are any impacts on sustainability, and what are the consequences as well on the costs on the European market?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think there's no definitive view that. I think if you do some back of the envelope estimates, it indicates that domestic production would be more advantageous, because you don't have the transport costs. You probably have cheaper production costs, because if you go to, let's say, the Maghreb or the Middle East, you have more solar resources, so the production costs would be lower, but then you have to actually get it to Europe. So that's why in our scenario, we actually ended up with a lot of almost exclusively domestic production. At the same time, and also as the EU is discussing, there is a plausible scenario where we say, look, we want to work with our neighboring countries to have them be exporters of energy into the EU. For example, Morocco producing renewable energy, and that then being transported with a high direct current voltage line to Iberia, or we ship the green hydrogen, the ammonia from the Middle East to Europe. So that's absolutely feasible. It would most likely lead to a slight increase in cost for those zero carbon resources. But again, I think there's lots of developments, innovation that could happen, so that picture might change, but that's kind of the current best available outlook.
So when we talk about member states and their speed in the green transition, it would be interesting, of course, to talk about the fact that some EU countries are already faster in the green transition than others. And also the circumstances in the EU member states differ, of course, widely, as we all know. Simply speaking, for instance, in the North Sea, we have good conditions for wind power, while in the South, we could use solar energy to a greater degree. And in your report, it is assumed that countries collaborate and offset each other to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. And could you maybe elaborate on the difficulties and challenges we would face if each country tried to achieve the climate targets by themselves, thereby outlining the benefit of European cooperation? Yeah. I know it's a theoretical question somehow, but we always underline the argument, we can only achieve these goals together. And but we also have to give an explanation sometimes, right? So I'm interested what you think about that.
Yeah, no, and as you say, so we indeed laid out the scenario where we achieved the climate goals at the EU level, not at the member state level. And the benefits from that are particularly in the near term, since we have some member states that actually saw their emissions grow a bit. For example, Spain, who had an economic growth spurt in the early 2000s, and hence had actually a slight increase in emissions relative to the 1919 baseline, whereas, for example, some Northern European countries, Germany, the Nordics, actually have already been decreasing emissions. So they have a different starting point when we now say relative to 1990 levels, we want to achieve minus 55%. So for someone like Spain, for example, the 2030 target would be relatively harder, if not extremely hard to achieve, than it would be, for example, for Germany. At the same time then, if we look to 2050 and the climate neutrality target, Germany, for example, would actually struggle more than there because we have lots of industry where there's going to be residual emissions, whereas Spain, for example, has much cheaper solar resources that they can export to the rest of the EU. They also could see negative emissions from their natural carbon sinks. So we could see this, just picking one example, but we could see Germany offsetting Spain in the near term and Spain offsetting Germany in the long term, and hence reducing costs for both of them in overall. I think it would be probably achievable to the goals at member state level, possibly. I think there's some near-term challenges, particularly with the countries that have seen emissions grow. But there's a big risk of increasing costs across the board, and also having lock-in to suboptimal technologies. Because some of the countries that then would have to really sprint hard to achieve the 2030 goals, they might then opt, for example, for lots of carbon capture and storage, which would then be kind of lock them into that technology, and they wouldn't then use a more optimal technology that would become available in 2030s, for example.
Thank you very much for your thoughts in here. I was just seeing in the chat that there was the question, what can be done with the questions who were not answered yet in this webinar. So please feel free to send it to henrike.hahn@europarl.europa.eu. And then I'm happy to answer them, or maybe also to refer these questions again to Hauke. As you have seen, you can find the study report also in the internet, so you can once again read it there. And I think it's very exciting, all the knowledge you have and all the detailed knowledge on all these kind of issues. And that is so much needed as well. And once again, I was very, very delighted that we found in your study such a support in the rational way, how to support on an economic level as well. The change, the need for transition to protect our climate. And we need much more arguments than that. And even to have a study in such a quality, that is a real pleasure. And I'm very, very glad that you found the time for us today, Hauke, for all the questions and the discussions. And I hope we will continue to stay in contact also on a professional basis, right? Because it's very, very interesting what you're doing. And I'm glad that McKinsey also is reporting on that. And I hope that they will continue with that work as well in general, because it's actually, that's the future of the economy, right? Sustainability and how we bundle all these aspects together. And also at the same time that we have a just transition, as you just mentioned, right? Because there's so many aspects to consider, like the decarbonization process. Lots of regions in Europe, people are losing their jobs, and they have to find for alternatives. And it is really, really important that also the European actors on a political ground do not leave the people aside or behind, that we really take that into account, and that we have a strategy, right? And that we discuss that with scientists, politicians, scientists, business leaders, consulting companies, and that we bundle our knowledge together and fight for that change. And it is possible, a green economy, a green transition of industrial policy as well. And I'm very, very glad that you found the time. Thank you very much, dear Hauke. Thanks to your participants at home or in your offices. We really appreciated that you had the time. And I'm very sure that we will continue that kind of questions on different webinars. And please stay in contact and turn it on. And we're happy to see you again. Thank you very much. Thanks, dear Hauke. Thanks to the technical team and everyone who was behind the scenes working on that today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.